Hello again from Metro Manila, the Philippines, Southeastern Asia. This Wednesday, on May 8th, 2019, the South African voters elected a new 400-seat National Assembly, which is their federal parliament's lower house. The upper house is elected by the provincial legislatures. As expected, the left-wing ruling party, the African National Congress, retained its majority. It did, however, suffer losses. Interestingly, also the second largest party, the Liberal Democratic Alliance, also suffered losses. So the gains were made by several minor parties. So let us now examine the results more in detail. According to nearly complete elections, the African National Congress, led by President Cyril Ramaphosa, indeed won the elections. Some person has been tampering with this file, so I'm going to have to then go to a different file. I assume that the French language one will have more valid results. So according to these preliminary results, based on nearly complete election results or returns, the African National Congress received about 57.7% of the vote and 232 seats out of 400. The Democratic Alliance took 20.7% of the vote and 84 seats. The Economic Freedom Fighters received 10.7% of the vote and 44 seats. The Zulu Inkatha Freedom Party received 3.4% of the vote and 14 seats. The Freedom Front took 2.3% of the vote and 10 seats. The African Christian Democratic Party received 0.8% of the vote and 4 seats. The United Democratic Party took 0.5% of the vote and 2 seats, as did the African Transformation Movement, and then the Good Party, which took 0.4% of the vote and also 2 seats. Also, the National Freedom Party, the Independent African Congress, and the Congress of the People took 2 seats with 0.4 and 0.3% of the vote. So the result means that most likely Cyril Ramaphosa will continue his service as the South African state president, and in that case, South Africa very likely will continue to have at the federal level a single party government composed of ministers, cabinet ministers of the African National Congress. South Africa is a curious mixture of presidential and parliamentary democracies. It is presidential in the sense that the president is both the head of state and the head of government. However, it is parliamentary in the sense that the federal parliament, more specifically its lower house, the National Assembly, elects the president and also has the right to dismiss him through a vote of no confidence. This, of course, would be impossible in a purely presidential democracy or in a purely presidential republic. Only the parliament or Congress or its upper house would have a right to force the president to resign through an impeachment trial, which of course would require more than just a simple majority, most likely a 2/3 majority like it does in the United States. It is curious that despite the fact that the African National Congress has already governed South Africa for 25 years, for the entire time when it has been a multiracial democracy, and there have been a number of allegations of corruption, many of which probably have been at least partly correct. that still enough South African voters do not want to give, for example, the Democratic Alliance a chance to govern the country. Of course, the Democratic Alliance would not be able to govern South Africa without coalition partners. And it remains to be seen if at some point in the future, the African National Congress eventually will lose its majority in the National Assembly, its votes sinking sufficiently below 50%. What will then happen? Will it try to form an a coalition government with the Democratic Alliance, or maybe with another party? And then what will be that other parties or those other parties' conditions for supporting an African National Congress-led party? Another issue, of course, has been a controversial law that was passed in 2018 or implemented, whereby the government has a right, the South African federal government has the right to expropriate or take to public ownership and then distribute to those farmers who are more in need of land many of the wealthy white South African farmers' farms. There has been a string of killings in which under 5,000 white South African farmers and their family members have been killed, although it is unfair to claim, contrary to one Finnish Calvinist Bible teacher and Christian blogger, that the Boers or Afrikaners would be threatened by a genocide, because the proportion of those Boers or Afrikaners who have been killed compared to many other ethnic groups in the world who are facing a series of killings has been a lot lower. For example, Sudan's, even to some extent, South Sudan's Christians have faced a genocide for a long time. Christians are being persecuted also in Eritrea, to some extent in Ethiopia maybe, and in Nigeria, in certain provinces of the country, notoriously, there are continuing clashes from time to time between Muslims and Christians. So later this month, the newly elected South African Federal Parliament will assemble, and most likely President Cyril Ramaphosa will be re-elected by the National Assembly.